The war had dragged on for months. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of distant explosions echoed through the darkened sky. The planet was dying, its surface scorched by the relentless bombardment of an alien fleet. This was no ordinary war. Earth had become a battleground, not just for survival, but for pride. The alien forces known as the Zelenary had underestimated humanity at first, seeing them as weak, fragile beings with no place among the stars. They had come to wipe out the human race. Lyra, a high-ranking officer in the Zelenary military, stood on the observation deck of their flagship, gazing down at Earth. Her mind raced with thoughts of the battle to come. She had never seen anything quite like it. The human forces, though outnumbered and outgunned, had shown an astonishing resilience. They were not the primitive species the Zelenary had expected. Instead, they fought with desperation, ingenuity, and an unbreakable will. Lyra had seen humans in battle before, but what had shocked her the most was their ability to adapt. They didn't fight by any conventional rules. No, they fought like animals, without fear, without hesitation. And somehow they always managed to find a way to win. The Zelenary had been pushed back again, and now they had one final strike left. The fleet was preparing for a final assault to break humanity once and for all. Lyra had her orders, and yet there was something about this particular mission that bothered her. She had been sent down to the surface on a direct order from the Supreme Commander himself. Her task was simple: find the human leader, a man named Captain John Harper, and eliminate him. He was the symbol of humanity's resistance, and if he fell, the humans would have no chance. Lyra's shuttle touched down near a crumbled building. She stepped out, her boots crunching on the charred earth. The landscape around her was desolate, a reminder of the devastation that had taken place. The remnants of human structures lay in ruins, and the sky above was a sickly shade of gray. She adjusted her rifle, making sure it was ready. There was no room for error. As she moved deeper into the city, the sounds of battle began to fade, replaced by an eerie silence. Something felt off. Lyra's instincts were sharp, and they told her that she wasn't alone. She stopped, her ears straining for any noise. A faint rustling came from behind a nearby wall. She took a step forward, her weapon raised, but as she turned the corner, she froze. There he was, Captain John Harper. He was kneeling beside a destroyed barricade, his back to her. His uniform was torn, his face bruised and bloodied, but he didn't seem to notice her presence. Instead, he was focused on something in his hands. Lyra's finger hovered over the trigger. She had him. This was it. The war would be over. She had been trained for moments like this. She had been trained to kill without hesitation. But she did single quotes something in the way he held that piece of metal, a piece of what had once been a weapon, stopped her. Lyra's mind raced. Why hadn't he noticed her? Why was he still alive? Shouldn't he be preparing for his last stand like all the others? Why are you still here? Lyra demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. Captain Harper slowly turned to face her. His eyes were tired, but there was no fear, no panic, just a calmness that unsettled her. "I'm waiting," he said simply, his voice hoarse from the days of fighting. "Waiting for what?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper now, caught off guard by his response. "For the end," Harper replied. "We all know it's coming. Your people are winning. The humans will be gone soon enough, but not yet. Not until I've done what I came here to do." Lyra narrowed her eyes, unsure of what he meant. "You're talking about surrendering, aren't you?" Harper shook his head slowly. "No, I came to make sure that we leave behind a message. A message that you'll understand, that we fought. We didn't give up, no matter how hopeless it seemed." Lyra's mind spun. What was he saying? The humans fighting until the end, even though they had lost. Even though they were no match for the Zelenari as advanced technology, it didn't make sense. The human leader had to be lying. There had to be some trick here, some desperate attempt to buy time. And yet, there was something in his expression, something in the way he spoke that gave her pause. She lowered her weapon slightly. And what exactly is this message? Harper looked up at her, his eyes not filled with anger, but with something much harder to read, something like sorrow, mixed with determination. That humans ... Don't give up, even when everything is lost. And you will remember that. Lyra didn't know what to say. She had prepared for this moment for so long, an enemy to kill, to defeat, to crush underfoot. But what she saw before her wasn't a broken man begging for mercy. It was a human who was willing to die for a cause, for a belief, for something bigger than survival. Lyra's heart began to pound in her chest. She had expected this human to beg, to scream, to plead for his life. But instead, he had chosen to stand tall, even in the face of certain death. There was something terrifying in that ... something that made her question everything. Why? She finally whispered, barely able to form the question. Harper smiled faintly, the corners of his lips twitching upward, as if the answer was simple. Because we never stop fighting. For a long moment, the two of them stood there, locked in an unspoken understanding. The tension was thick in the air, and the weight of their conflict seemed to hang between them. Lyra stood frozen, unable to pull the trigger. Something had changed within her. It wasn't victory that mattered anymore. It wasn't even the war. It was something deeper, something human. She had expected the end to be violent, chaotic, and decisive. But now, the question remained, what would she do next? The silence stretched between them, thick and almost unbearable. Lyra's fingers hovered near the trigger of her rifle, yet the words Harper had spoken still echoed in her mind. We never stop fighting. She had heard warriors say similar things before, but never with such quiet resolve. The way he said it wasn't a boast. It wasn't some final cry of defiance. It was a truth that seemed to hang in the air, almost like a promise. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't facing an ordinary human. Lyra glanced down at Harper's bloodied hands, still holding the twisted remains of a weapon, a rifle that had long since been rendered useless. Yet he clutched it like it still had meaning. You're not afraid? Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as though asking herself more than him. Harper's gaze softened. Fear. It's not that. It's just ... When you've already lost everything, what's left to fear? He let out a small sigh, looking toward the ruined city around them. Maybe we don't fear death, but that doesn't mean we'll stop fighting. Lyra's mind raced. She had heard the stories of humans, their tenacity in battle, their ability to adapt and evolve under pressure. The Zelenari had underestimated them from the start, assuming that their advanced technology and superior intellect would be enough to crush the species. But humans had surprised them. They had fought back harder, longer, and more unpredictably than any of the Zelenari commanders had anticipated. Yet here was Harper, broken, battered, surrounded by the remnants of his people's fight, and still, he spoke of a fight that wasn't about survival. It was about something far more profound. But what? What could they possibly be fighting for now? Lyra lowered her weapon completely, still not able to process the shift in her thoughts. There was a part of her, the soldier part, that screamed for her to finish this. The mission was clear. Harper's death would send a message to the humans. It would break them. They would surrender, and the war would finally be over. But another part of her, something she had never expected to feel in the middle of an enemy camp, hesitated. This isn't what I was prepared for. She realized with a chill creeping up her spine that she wasn't sure how to deal with this situation. She wasn't facing an enemy soldier anymore. She was facing a person, a human, who had accepted that death was inevitable. The concept felt foreign to her. Harper wiped a streak of blood from his brow, then placed the broken rifle down beside him. "You're here to kill me, aren't you?" Lyra didn't answer right away. The words stuck in her throat. "If you want to," Harper continued, his voice steady despite the pain. "Go ahead, but it won't change anything. Not for me. Not for us." Lyra stared at him, struggling with the turmoil inside her. She had been trained for this. Every Zelenary officer was taught to view the enemy as little more than obstacles to their mission. Humans had been reduced to targets in her mind, simple, predictable targets. But Harper wasn't just another target. He was a man who had lost everything, yet still stood tall. "You don't understand," Lyra said quietly. "We've been fighting for so long. I've been sent to end this, to bring it all to a close. And you think my death will do that?" Harper asked, raising an eyebrow. "You think that's going to fix it all?" Lyra clenched her jaw. Her mind spun. She had never considered it that way. To her, it had always been about the war, the enemy that needed to be destroyed, the final blow that would bring about an end. But now, standing before this human, she began to question if it was even possible to end something like this with just violence. She had seen her comrades fall. The Zelenary fleet was powerful, but they too were running low on resources. And as much as the Zelenary might have believed in their own superiority, they had underestimated the human spirit. "Why are you still here, Captain?" Lyra asked again, her voice trembling slightly. "Why aren't you hiding, running?" "Where would I go?" Harper replied, his voice flat. "I can't run from something that's already been lost. But I'm not hiding, either. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the day when someone understands why we fight, even when everything's against us." There was a bitter laugh in his voice, but no anger. "Just exhaustion. You think you're going to change the course of the war with words?" Lyra asked, her voice sharp. She couldn't let herself show weakness. She couldn't let this human manipulate her with his strange calmness. Harper shook his head slowly, as if trying to piece together his thoughts. "No, I know I can't change the war. I just want to leave something behind, something that shows we fought, something that says we were human, that we didn't just lay down and die when we could have." For the first time, Lyra felt a tug at something deep within her, something she had buried long ago. It wasn't just her duty to her people, her mission, or even her own survival that she had focused on for so long. It was something more. "Is that all you want? To be remembered?" she asked softly, almost to herself. Harper looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. "You can kill me, but you can't kill the memory of us. You can't kill what we stand for. And no matter what you think of us, you'll never be able to forget it." Lyra swallowed hard. He was right. There was something in his words that reached deeper than just words of resistance. There was something about humanity she hadn't understood before. A refusal to be forgotten, even when the battle was lost. Even when the end was inevitable. It was more than survival. It was about making an imprint on the world, one that would echo long after they were gone. She stood there, weapons still in her hands, unsure of what to do. She had the power to end this, to take away this last piece of humanity's spirit. But as she looked into Harper's eyes, something inside her shifted. She had never questioned orders before. But now, she wasn't sure she could follow through. With them, what happens now? She asked, the question hanging in the air. Harper's answer came as a soft exhale. "We wait. And we hope. That's all we've ever done." And in that moment, Lyra realized perhaps hope was something she had lost long ago. Lyra stood motionless, as if time itself had paused around her. The sounds of the war seemed distant now, muted by the heavy weight of Harper's words. She had expected to feel victorious, to feel like she had achieved something, an end to the war, a swift and clean victory for the Zelenary. But instead, all she felt was confusion, doubt, and an overwhelming sense of unease. Harper's steady gaze never wavered. He sat, bloodied and bruised, but somehow composed. It was almost as if the war was no longer about winning or losing for him. To him, it was about something deeper, something more profound that Lyra couldn't quite grasp. "You've already lost, you know," Lyra said, her voice quieter now, the edge gone from it. It wasn't a statement of pride anymore, but an observation. A cold fact. Harper didn't flinch. He didn't need to. "You're right, we've lost everything, but we haven't lost ourselves." His voice was calm, yet carried a weight that made Lyra's insides twist. "And we will never lose that." Lyra found herself turning away, pacing back and forth. The emotions she had buried for so long, doubt, uncertainty, were rising within her. The mission she had been assigned had seemed so clear. She had been trained for this. But standing in front of Harper, everything had become unclear. What was she fighting for? What was she really trying to achieve? The Zelenari had invaded Earth, destroyed cities, and killed millions of humans. But now it felt empty. It was as if the war itself had lost its purpose. What would victory really mean in the end? For the first time, Lyra realized she was questioning her own beliefs. She had always thought the Zelenari were right, that they were superior, that humanity was nothing more than a fleeting species that didn't deserve to be part of the cosmos. But Harper, sitting there without fear, without rage, made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. What if we're wrong? Lyra's grip on her rifle tightened as a wave of frustration washed over her. She couldn't let herself be swayed by a single human's words. It was a trap. She had to stay focused. The mission was clear. Eliminate the human resistance leader and break their will. It was supposed to be a clean kill, but it wasn't clean anymore. Harper seemed to sense her turmoil. "You've already made up your mind, haven't you?" he asked, his voice soft. "You came here to kill me, to finish the job, to end the fight. But something is stopping you, isn't it?" Lyra turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "You think you know me?" Harper didn't respond right away, instead simply meeting her gaze. He was calm, too calm. It unsettled her. The humans were supposed to be chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. But Harper he wasn't like that. He was different. There was a certainty in him that even Lyra, after all her training, could not understand. "Why?" Lyra asked suddenly, her voice trembling slightly despite herself. "Why do you keep fighting when you know it's hopeless?" Harper looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, no bitterness, just a quiet, unwavering belief. "We fight because it's who we are. Because if we don't, we lose everything that makes us human. It's not about winning. It's about standing up, no matter how many times you get knocked down. It's about showing that, even when it seems like there's no hope left, we still refuse to be forgotten." Lyra's mind reeled as she tried to process his words. But weakness. That's what she had been taught. That was the flaw in humanity. Their weakness was their unwillingness to accept their fate, their refusal to see when they had lost. Yet, standing in front of Harper, Lyra began to wonder if there was more to it. What if what if they weren't weak? What if they had something we don't? The thought gnawed at her. The Zelenari were a proud, ancient race, strong in their own right. But what if their pride was blinding them? What if they had underestimated humanity's ability to endure? Maybe it wasn't about winning or losing. Maybe it was about something far more important, the fight itself. "Do you think I will let you go?" Lyra asked quietly, her mind torn between duty and the strange pull of Harper's words, a slight, tired smile on his face. "I think you'll do what you have to do. But I hope that in the end, you'll understand why we fought." For a moment, Lyra didn't know how to respond. There was nothing she could say to that. It was as if Harper had stripped away all her arguments, all her justifications for what she was doing. He had reduced everything to its simplest form, a fight for survival, a fight to be remembered, to leave something behind that proved they had been alive. And suddenly, Lyra wasn't sure if she wanted to kill him anymore. She lowered her rifle, the weight of it suddenly feeling unbearable. Her heart raced as she glanced at the destruction around them, the remnants of the human cities, the bloodshed, the war that seemed never-ending. What had all of this been for? What would it prove if she killed him now? Another casualty, another. Notch in the Zelenaria's war tally. But would it stop the war? Would it even make a difference? Harper must have seen the hesitation in her eyes, because he spoke again, his voice gentle. You're not like them, Lyra. I can see it. You don't have to keep fighting for something that doesn't make sense anymore. You have a choice. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had always believed there was only one choice, the mission, the duty. But standing before this human, she realized that the real battle wasn't on the surface of the dying planet. It wasn't between the Zelenari and humanity. It was within her. The war had taken everything from her. Her comrades, her beliefs, her understanding of the universe. And now, standing on this shattered world, Lyra realized that this was her moment. The moment she would decide what she really stood for. Harper was right. Maybe it wasn't about the victory or the death of one man. Maybe it was about the fight itself, and the choice she still had to make. Maybe, Lyra whispered, almost to herself, maybe I'm not who I thought I was. Harper smiled. Maybe you're human after all. For the first time in a long time, Lyra wasn't sure where the war would take her. But one thing was certain, the battle wasn't over, not for her. Not yet. The air between them was thick with uncertainty. Lyra's fingers twitched, the rifle still hanging loosely in her hands. She had expected to feel resolve, to feel the clear call of duty surge through her like it always had. But now, the weight of her mission felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just a weapon in her hands anymore. It was a symbol of everything she had once believed. And now it felt like a relic from a past she was no longer sure she belonged to. Harper, despite the bloodstains and exhaustion, looked almost serene. His eyes never left her, as if he could see straight into her soul. It made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't experienced before, not even when facing entire armies of enemies. She had always held the upper hand until now. Until this. Human, the symbol of everything she had been trained to hate, had shown her something she never thought possible. She could hear the distant sounds of battle in the background, muffled by the thick layers of ash and smoke that clung to the sky. The Zelenari forces were still pressing their attack, but the city around them was in ruins, a testament to the war that had raged for so long. The human resistance was crumbling, but Captain John Harper, he didn't seem to care. I thought you'd be different, Lyra finally spoke, her voice hollow with a realization she had been avoiding. I thought I would come here, find you begging, crying for your life, but instead, you're just waiting. You're not afraid of me. You're not even angry. It's as if you've already accepted everything. Harper met her gaze, his expression unwavering. You're right, I've accepted it. But acceptance doesn't mean surrender. It doesn't mean giving up. It just means understanding the reality of the situation. He paused, letting his words sink in. It means knowing that there are things bigger than this war. Things that will survive even when everything else is gone. Lyra couldn't comprehend it. What could be bigger than this war? Her entire existence had been defined by the conquest of other civilizations, the endless wars between the Zelenari and every other species they deemed beneath them. She had been taught that survival was the ultimate goal, that the strength of her people, the superiority of the Zelenari, was what mattered. But Harper's calmness, his acceptance, it didn't make sense to her. It was alien, human. You're talking about something I don't understand, Lyra said, her voice low. Your people, humanity, they're so different from us. Why do you fight if there's no hope of winning? What's left to fight for? Harper smiled softly, though the weariness in his eyes betrayed the pain of the long battle. We fight for more than just survival, Lyra. We fight for the people who aren't here anymore. We fight for those who didn't make it. We fight for what we've lost, and for what we might still have, even if it's just a memory. But most of all, we fight for each other. For those who stand beside us. Lyra's heart tightened. It was something so simple, so human, that it seemed almost laughable. They fight for each other? But why? Why when their world was crumbling? Why when they had no chance of winning? But the longer she stood there, the more she realized Harper wasn't talking about winning. He was talking about living. About something that the Zelenari had long forgotten. Lyra had spent her entire life believing that victory came only through domination, through overpowering those weaker than yourself. The Zelenari didn't fight for each other. They fought for supremacy. They fought to ensure that their people would endure and conquer the galaxy, no matter who or what they had to destroy in the process. The very idea of fighting for a cause, for something beyond survival, it shook her. But we have everything, Lyra muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. We're the ones with the strength, the technology, the power. You're just humans. You've never even seen the stars the way we have. And yet, you fight like you have something we don't. Harper's smile faltered, but he didn't respond immediately. He looked at her, the weariness still present, but there was something else in his eyes. Something almost understanding. You're right, he said finally. We don't have the power you do. We don't have your technology. We don't have your fleets. But we have something you don't, Lyra. We have hope. Hope that even when the stars are gone, even when the battle's lost, we'll still stand. And that's something that no amount of technology can replace. Lyra flinched, as if those words had struck her harder than any bullet ever could. Hope. That was what humans had? Hope? It felt foreign, almost naive. And yet, the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. The Zelenari had everything: strength, intelligence, resources. But they had never understood the power of hope. They had never understood that sometimes the will to fight was more important than the power to win. I'm not like them, Lyra whispered, more to herself than to Harper. I don't want to destroy. I don't want to win anymore. Harper's eyes softened. Then don't. You don't have to keep fighting for a cause you don't believe in. You've seen it, haven't you? The destruction. The endless cycle of death. It won't bring you peace. It won't bring any of us peace. Lyra swallowed, her throat tight. She had spent so long following orders, believing that she was doing the right thing. But now, everything was changing. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to fight for. I don't know what to do, Lyra said quietly, her voice trembling. I don't know what we are fighting for anymore. Harper's smile returned, faint but sincere. You're fighting for yourself now, Lyra. And that's the most important battle of all. For a moment, Lyra was silent. She could feel the pull of her old self, the soldier, the conqueror calling her back to what was familiar. But then she thought of the humans who had fought beside Harper, of the families that had stood against the Zelenari's onslaught, of the countless lives lost for a cause that seemed so much greater than just survival. And something inside her shifted, like a piece of her that had been dormant for years, was finally awakening. Hope. It wasn't just a human thing. It could be hers too. Lyra made her decision. She lowered her rifle completely, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the choice she had made. I don't want to destroy anymore, she said, her voice stronger now. I want to build something, for all of us, Harper nodded. That's the first step, Lyra. It's the only step that matters. And for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in years, the spark of hope. The war wasn't over, but this moment, this choice was where it all began. Lyra stood there, the heavy weight of her decision settling on her shoulders. The smoke from the distant battle still hung in the air, thick and suffocating, but somehow it felt less oppressive now. The constant hum of the war, the sound of ships launching from the Zelenary fleet, and the distant explosions of human resistance seemed like a dull echo in the back of her mind. She could still hear it, but it didn't hold the same power over her anymore. Harper, sitting on the cold ground, watched her with a quiet, understanding gaze. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. He understood what had just happened, and that was enough. Lyra took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to process the wave of emotions that had surged through her. She had never imagined she'd be standing here, in the ruins of a city she was supposed to destroy, with the leader of the very people she had been trained to kill. Yet here she was, no longer sure if she could go back to the path she had walked for so long. The rifle in her hands felt like a foreign object now, a reminder of everything she had done and everything she was trying to leave behind. She glanced at Harper, his bloodied figure sitting in front of her, but there was no contempt in his eyes, no judgment. Only something she couldn't quite place. Was it empathy? Was it hope? "Harper," Lyra said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "How do you do it? How do you keep going when everything is falling apart?" Harper's expression softened. He didn't hesitate. "We keep going because we have each other. Because we don't let the world break us. We help those who need us, and we fight for the ones who can't fight anymore. Even when everything seems lost, we don't stop." Lyra swallowed hard. She had seen so much death. She had seen families torn apart, cities reduced to rubble, all in the name of victory. And now, standing here, hearing those words, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. "Everything I've done," she said slowly, almost as if speaking to herself, "I've been told it was for the greater good, for the survival of my people." Her eyes flickered to the shattered remnants of human civilization that surrounded them. But what is survival if it means becoming like this? What is it worth if we lose everything that makes us us? Harper met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something truly human in them. "Survival isn't enough, Lyra. You're right. Surviving just to survive not living. Living is about having purpose. It's about fighting for something worth fighting for." He paused, letting his words sink in. And sometimes, that means admitting when you're wrong. It means standing up and saying, "I won't be part of this anymore." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavier than any weapon Lyra had ever held. She had always thought of survival as the highest goal, the ultimate purpose. But now she realized that survival without meaning, without humanity, without hope, was nothing more than mere existence. A chill ran down her spine as she thought of her people, the Zelenary. They were strong, they were proud, and they had conquered so much, but at what cost? What had they truly gained if their only purpose was to dominate and destroy? Was that really living? Lyra shook her head, her mind spinning. "I don't know if I can undo what I've done," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can fix it. I don't know if I can stop this war." Harper didn't offer her empty reassurances. He didn't tell her that everything would be okay, or that she could make it all better. Instead, he simply nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You don't have to fix everything right now. You don't have to undo everything. But you can choose to make a different decision. From this moment on, you can choose to stop the cycle of destruction." Lyra closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. For so long, she had been nothing more than a soldier, following orders, carrying out missions with unquestioning precision. The war had been a part of her, ingrained in her very being. But now it all felt so hollow. What happens next? She asked softly, her voice trembling as uncertainty flooded her once more. Harper stood up slowly, wincing from the pain in his side, but his eyes were steady, unwavering. "Now we find a way to survive together," he said. "You don't have to be alone in this fight anymore. You don't have to carry the burden of it all. We're all in this together. The humans and the Zelenari, we don't have to be enemies anymore. Not if you choose to make a new path. Lyra felt a rush of emotions crash through her: fear, doubt, hope. For the first time, she wasn't sure where her path would lead. But as she stood there, looking at Harper and the devastation around them, she realized that perhaps the most important thing wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about who was right or wrong, it was about choosing, together. She repeated softly, the words strange and powerful on her tongue. The decision wasn't easy, and the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. But something inside her had shifted, something she hadn't expected. For the first time, she felt like she could breathe. For the first time, she understood what Harper had meant about hope. The war had taken so much. It had destroyed so many lives. But now, in this broken city, in the face of their shared destruction, Lyra saw the possibility of something else. A future. A new beginning. "You're right," she said, her voice growing stronger. "We can choose. And I choose to fight for something better." Harper smiled, and for the first time, Lyra saw the weight of his own battles, his own sacrifices, reflected in the simple expression. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The promise was made between them, a promise to stop the endless cycle of destruction, a promise to find a way to move forward together. And as they stood there, surrounded by the ruins of their world, they knew that the true fight had only just begun. But this time, they would face it with hope. The sky above them had dimmed further, the once fiery horizon now consumed by a heavy cloud of ash and smoke. The air was thick and choking, but for the first time, Lyra could breathe. It wasn't the fresh, pure air of victory she had once imagined, no. It was something more fragile. It was the air of change, of uncertainty, of possibility. Lyra glanced at Harper, who was standing beside her, his expression contemplative as he gazed out over the city. It had been hours since they'd shared those words, and the weight of the decision still pressed down on her. She had told him she wanted to fight for something better, but now the gravity of that commitment was setting in. They couldn't just stop the war with a few words. This wasn't a simple decision. It wasn't going to be easy to convince either side to stop, to reconcile two species who had fought bitterly for so long. But for the first time in her life, Lyra had no illusions. "We're not the same anymore," she said, her voice low, but firm. "The Zelenari, they'll never forgive me. Not after everything I've done." Harper nodded, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "It won't be easy. They'll fight you. They'll fight us. But that's the price we pay for choosing something different, for choosing to do what's right instead of what's easy." Lyra had always been the one to follow orders, the one who never questioned, who obeyed without hesitation. But now everything felt different. It was as if the ground beneath her had shifted, and she wasn't sure where her footing was anymore. Could she really face the Zelenari now as a traitor to their cause? Could she stand up to the very empire she had once been a proud part of? "What if I can't do it?" Lyra's voice wavered, though she tried to steady herself. "What if they won't listen to me? I was a soldier. They won't just let me walk away. They'll come for me." Harper turned to her, his eyes soft yet full of understanding. "Then we'll fight with everything we've got, together." He glanced at her weapon, still hanging loosely in her hands. "You don't have to fight alone, Lyra. You've already started to make your choice. You don't have to keep fighting for something you don't believe in." Lyra hesitated. The weight of her rifle still pressed against her, but now it felt alien in her hands. She had been a weapon for so long, her life defined by it. Now it felt like a reminder of the violence she had participated in. The destruction, the death. Was this the answer? Could she really lay it down for good? "There's still so much I don't understand," Lyra murmured, her voice almost to herself. "I don't know how to make them see. The Zelenari have never been about understanding. They're about conquest, about survival at any cost. I was bred for this, but now... She trailed off, lost for words. Now I don't know who I am anymore. You're someone who has the courage to make a change, Harper replied, his voice steady. That's who you are now. And that's... Enough. Lyra stared at the ground, lost in thought. Courage. That word felt strange to her. She had always known courage in battle. Courage to carry out orders. Courage to fight until there was no fight left. But this this felt different. This wasn't courage to kill or destroy. It was courage to step into the unknown. To face the consequences of her choices, no matter what they might be. And then she realized something. She didn't need to be alone in this fight. Not anymore. She looked up at Harper. What's the next step? Harper took a deep breath, then met her gaze. We go to the humans. We make contact with the resistance. It won't be easy, but they'll need to hear you. They'll need to hear your story. They need to know that not all Zelenari are here to destroy them, that there are others who want peace. Lyra nodded, though her heart raced with the thought of facing those who had fought so hard against her people. She knew they wouldn't trust her. She had been a soldier on the other side, a killer. To them, she would be a symbol of everything they hated. The Zelenari were their enemies, and she had been a part of that. She could already hear their accusations in her head, but Harper's words stayed with her. We'll fight with everything we've got, together. All right, she said finally, her voice firm. We go to the humans. We tell them the truth. Harper gave a nod, and the two of them began to move, walking through the ruins of the city with a sense of purpose. They didn't know what the future would hold, or if the humans would accept them. But they did know one thing. They couldn't keep running from the war. They had to face it head-on. As they reached the edge of the city, they found an old communication relay, its once pristine surface marred by the ravages of war. Harper moved to the control panel, his fingers deftly working despite his injuries. Lyra stood watch, her eyes scanning the horizon, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The transmission went through. Static crackled briefly before a voice came through, crackling and distorted. This is Captain Ellie Shaw of the Earth Resistance. Who's this? Harper stepped forward, his voice calm but urgent. Captain Shaw, this is Captain John Harper of the Human Resistance. And I'm bringing someone you need to hear, Lyra. She was one of the Zelenari commanders. There was a long pause, and Lyra could almost hear the disbelief on the other end. You're telling me the enemy commander is on our side now? Harper's eyes met Lyra's, and she could see the hint of doubt in them as well. But they had come this far. There was no turning back. I know this is hard to believe, but Lyra has made a choice, Harper said. She's here to help end this war, but she can't do it alone. The static filled the line again, and for a moment, Lyra thought they had lost the connection. But then Captain Shaw's voice came through again, firm but cautious. We'll meet you at coordinates Delta 7. But understand this, if you're lying, if this is some trick, we won't hesitate to end it right here. I don't care who you were. You're either with us, or you're still the enemy. Lyra nodded, though. She knew that the real battle was only just beginning. The humans would never trust her. They would never forget what she had done. But she wasn't asking for their forgiveness. She was asking for the chance to make things right. To show them that not all Zelenari were their enemies. With one last glance at Harper, she made her way toward the coordinates. There would be no more hiding. No more running. The war might not be over, but the fight for peace, that fight, the one that truly mattered, had just begun. The air felt colder now, the tension thicker with every step Lyra and Harper took toward the rendezvous point. The shattered remnants of the city stretched out before them like a bleak, empty canvas, a symbol of the war that had destroyed so much. The once vibrant streets, now littered with debris, were eerily quiet. The distant hum of battle had faded, and all that remained was the oppressive silence of a world waiting for its fate to unfold. Lyra's mind was a storm of uncertainty. She had never felt this vulnerable, not even when she had faced entire armies. Now, as they approached the coordinates where the human resistance was waiting, she knew there was no going back. The humans would see her, not as someone who had once been part of their enemy, but as a symbol of everything they had fought against. She had betrayed them once by being a soldier of the Zelaneri. Now she had to convince them that she was ready to fight for something else. But could they trust her? Would they believe her? She glanced over at Harper, whose calm demeanor had remained steady throughout their journey. He wasn't worried. It seemed that, for him, hope and courage were enough. She envied that simplicity. Lyra wasn't sure if she had hope anymore, or if she could ever be certain again. But Harper had been right about one thing. The first step was choosing, and she had chosen. Now she would face whatever came next. They reached the meeting point, a small hidden compound that appeared abandoned, the remnants of a small resistance base left behind in haste. The walls were scarred with the marks of battle, and the surrounding landscape was littered with the signs of destruction. The wind carried the smell of burnt ash and blood as they entered the compound. A group of resistance fighters stepped forward, their rifles trained on the pair. They were cautious, their expressions a mix of suspicion and exhaustion. Lyra's eyes locked onto the leader, a woman in her 30s, her face hardened by the horrors of war. "Captain Ellie Shaw, are you sure about this, Harper?" Shaw's voice was low, cold. She had clearly been through too many betrayals to trust easily. Harper nodded without hesitation. "I'm sure. She's here to help. Lyra has made her choice." Lyra stood tall, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. She met Shaw's gaze, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Shaw was evaluating her, judging her. Lyra could feel it in every part of her being. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "I'm here to stop the war. I'm here because, after everything I've seen, I believe there's more to us than this, more to you than this. More than just enemies on opposite sides." Shaw's gaze softened ever so slightly, but her stance didn't change. "That's a hell of a claim, Commander. You want to tell me how you expect us to believe you? After everything your people have done?" Lyra's throat tightened as she forced herself to speak. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to forget. But I'm here now, and I'm not your enemy. I came to make sure this war ends, no matter what it takes. We've all lost too much." There was a moment of silence, the only sound the wind rustling through the broken buildings around them. Finally, Shaw lowered her rifle, but her eyes remained narrowed, cautious. "I don't trust you, Lyra. I don't trust the Zelaneri. But if you're serious about ending this, then prove it. Help us. Show us you're willing to fight for something more than your own survival." Lyra nodded, feeling a strange weight lift off her chest. She wasn't going to win their trust with words alone, but actions could speak louder than anything. This was just the beginning. "I will," Lyra said, her voice firm. "We'll work together. And we'll show everyone that peace is possible." Shaw exchanged a glance with the other fighters. There was no immediate acceptance, but there was a shift, a flicker of something new. A possibility. Shaw stepped back, motioning for the others to lower their weapons. "All right. You've got your chance," Shaw said. "But if you betray us, if you go back on your word..." Her voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. "We'll take you down, no questions asked." Lyra didn't flinch. She had no illusions. This was her only chance. There was no turning back now. Harper stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're in this together now. All of us. Let's make sure it counts." As the resistance fighters began to prepare for the next phase of their operation, Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. It wasn't over yet. There was still so much to be done. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something like hope begin to take root in her chest. A quiet, fragile thing, but strong enough to give her the courage to move forward. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future they could build together. And in that moment, Lyra realized that she had found something worth fighting for. The hours that followed were filled with action. The Resistance had plans to strike against the Zelenary Command Center, a final effort to weaken their hold over the planet. Lyra wasn't sure if they could pull it off. She wasn't sure if the Zelenary forces would ever truly accept peace. But, as she fought beside Harper and the humans, as she saw their faces filled with determination and resolve, she felt something she had never felt before, a sense of purpose. In the midst of the battle, as the explosions rocked the earth around them and the cries of the fallen echoed in the distance, Lyra knew that the war wasn't over yet. But this was the first step in a long, uncertain journey. She wasn't fighting for her people anymore. She wasn't fighting for conquest or survival. She was fighting for something greater, for hope, for a future that was not defined by endless cycles of destruction. And as the final strike was launched, as the Zelenary Command Center began to fall, Lyra found herself standing not just as a soldier, but as a person who had chosen to change the course of her destiny. The war was far from over, but it had begun to change. And for the first time, she believed in the possibility of peace.